A new law just kicked 4 million people off food assistance and made hunger worse for 800,000 children. At a House agricultural hearing, lawmakers demanded to know who asked for this. Let's watch.
And I appreciate that you bring some actual career experience to your role, but I'm going to be honest with you that there are decisions being made in your areas at USDA that I don't agree with at all. And if I had more time, I'd ask you some questions, but my time is limited, and I need to use it to address something with our chairman and the Republicans on this committee. I think this is really an outrageous hearing. It is outrageous for Republicans on the Agriculture Committee to try to take a victory lap over the big, ugly bill. I mean, we should be doing a hearing on how to fix the damage that was done to our farm economy in the big, ugly bill. I mean, it takes my breath away that this is the topic of today's hearing. Farm country is hurting, and families are struggling in this country. Donald Trump has taken a wrecking ball to the farm economy. Farm input costs are skyrocketing. Tariffs and Trump's stupid illegal war with Iran have sent prices soaring. Shipping is more expensive. Processing is more expensive. Overseas markets are gone. Land costs are increasing. Food industry monopolies are getting bigger. Farm worker communities are being terrorized by ICE. USDA is supposed to be there for our farmers, but it's being run by people who seem intent on dismantling it. Now, I did not walk away from our hearing with Secretary Rollins a couple of weeks ago feeling confident that she understands what farmers are going through and what USDA is supposed to do about it. The mass firings, the rescinding of grants and programs that help farmers thrive, the boneheaded reorganization, it feels like it's all done to help the big get bigger and the rich get richer. I mean, these genies are not going back in the bottle anytime soon. And with all this going on, what is it the Republicans in Congress are so proud of? The big ugly bill. I mean, the largest upward wealth transfer in American history, kicking an additional 4 million people off of food assistance, making hunger worse for 800,000 children. Republicans in Congress basically said, sure, we can help some farmers, but only by increasing hunger. I mean, seriously? What farmer asked you to make it harder for 4 million people to buy their food? What agriculture trade association came in and said, give us a modest, insufficient bump in our safety net program by making 800,000 kids go hungry? This is not the work of serious people. People who were serious about helping farmers and families would not turn a blind eye to malpractice at USDA. They wouldn't have advanced the laughable farm bill proposal that we saw in the House, or the dead-end one that we just saw come from Senate Republicans. They wouldn't sit quietly while Donald Trump tears everything down. The bottom has fallen out for so many people in this country, especially our farmers. And pretending that these things aren't happening, that everything is just fine, is shameful. It is pathetic. It's something that I'd expect to see from North Korea or Russia. Instead of admitting that you've gone down the wrong path or that dear leader Trump could ever be wrong, you're holding a pep rally. It's business as usual. You're telling farmers not to believe their lying eyes. I think it is beneath this body, and I think it's a rotten thing to do to people whom the Agriculture Committee is supposed to be helping. I don't know whether Republicans talk to farmers in their districts. I do all the time. But if you did, you'd know that they are not happy, that they are hurting, that they are struggling. And let me make one final point. If we don't do something to at least stall the implementation of the nearly $200 billion in cuts to SNAP, they will go into effect and hunger is going to skyrocket in this country. Already we have 48 million people in this country who are food insecure or hungry. It is shameful, it is unconscionable that that is the reality in the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world. And the idea that we are here not trying to prevent this catastrophe from happening, not trying to address the real impacts on our farm community that have come directly from the big ugly bill, I think, again, is outrageous. We need to do better. We need to get our heads into reality and understand what farmers are going through in this country, what struggling families are going through in this country. So I'm not going to sit here and just make believe everything is fine and ask questions like this is a hearing on something that is business as usual. This is not business as usual. This is outrageous, and we need to do something about it. And I yield back.
Chair would like to submit for the record,
Undersecretary Fordyce, I'm pleased that you're here. You represent fourth generation farming family. I'm third generation. For years, I have said that food security is our national security. And in the San Joaquin Valley that I represent, we live that every day. California is the #1 farm state in America, but we're not feeling the loving from the USDA. Bankruptcies are up 44% from last year. Farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women and growers are feeling not only a lack of connection, but we still produce food on America's dinner table and around the world. Let me ask you the first question on farm loans and Farm Service Agency. My office is hearing from California producers, and I work with the 8 counties from Kern County all the way to Stanislaus. The cuts that have been made in FSA are detrimental. They have delayed payments, prior approvals that have not been paid. The backlog has many causes, but the USDA cannot cut, reorganize, and reshuffle the local capacity and act surprised when farmers are stuck waiting, because that's the condition. When Fresno County, one of the most important agricultural counties in California and in the country, have trouble recruiting an FSA executive director, that tells me Washington isn't making it, it's making it harder for farmers to do. You thought to threaten to close the Fresno County and Kern County offices, 2 of the top ag counties in California. I don't get it. The Supplemental Disaster Relief Program is a good example. Producers whose losses fit existing crop insurance or non-insured crop disaster relief program data can move faster, but the specialty crop and diversity growers often face more paperwork. Under Stage 2, they've had to apply on a crop-by-crop basis and a county-by-county basis when some of them farm in multiple counties. It makes no sense. So let me ask, how many approved and unpaid Farm Service Agency cases are pending in California, and what's the USDA doing to clear the backlog?
Well, thank you, sir, for the question. And let me be the first to say how much we appreciate California and its ability to feed the nation and to feed the world. That does not go unnoticed.
I thank you for the compliment. Please answer the question.
I don't know the number.
I don't know is an answer.
Pardon me?
I don't know is an answer. Could you please get that information for me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that would be helpful. And on Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, will you commit to simplifying Stage 2 so specialty crops, which are the majority of the crops we grow in California, over 400 specialty crops that are diversified, so growers are not stuck applying on a crop-by-crop, county-by-county basis while other producers move faster?
Yes.
Good. Let's work on that. Let me go to the dairy program. You know, we're the largest dairy producing state in the nation. California dairies have been national leaders in reducing methane contribution. They are recycling nutrients, reusing manure, and turning waste into compost, fertilizer, long before Washington called it a regenerative agriculture. But there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Digesters can be an important tool for larger operations. Small and mid-sized dairies need options too: manure separators, composting, compost-bedded pack barns, and other practices avoid methane before it's created. So the House Farm Bill did not create a standalone alternative manure management program, but it did include language in my CALS Act in EQIP for practices that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including methane. So will the Natural Resources Conservation Service make it clear that the manure methane practices can qualify under EQIP? And will you work with California so small and mid-sized dairies can actually use the program?
Yes, sir. You know, you're referring to conservation practice standards within NRCS, and a lot of those practice standards do include manure management, digesters, and other things. And I know that those are subscribed in other parts. I'm assuming that they're subscribed in California. Yes, absolutely. We will. We want to make every practice standard that's available with the Natural Resources Conservation Service available in every state.
I like that answer. Let's work on it, okay?
Yes, sir.
And let me invite you to California, and we can get together with a roundtable, bipartisan group of folks, and we can list these issues as it relates to the FSA offices that are woefully undermined. And when the secretary here talked about a reorganization plan, I'll tell you, folks back home in farm country where it's hurting are less interested in your reorganization plan than ensuring that the programs that are oversubscribed are able to be made available to farmers, ranchers, and dairymen and women in California and throughout the country. Did you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, much more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here today. While investments in FPAC that we're here to discuss today were certainly meaningful for many producers, we cannot move forward without acknowledging the incredibly harmful pay-for that came at the expense of food security in communities across this country. You know, this Congress has spent far too much time robbing Peter to pay Paul, leaving nearly 82,000 people in my state of Alabama without the support of SNAP, including more than 23,000 children, and that's after we repeatedly heard throughout this process that no children will be impacted, that children are exempt. So whether intentional or not, exactly what we warned would happen is certainly happening across the state of Alabama, and as I'm sure you are aware, the state of Alabama is not one of the more affluent states in this nation. I have an individual median income across my district of about $32,000, which means about half the people in my district make less than $32,000. And so the SNAP program is certainly something that is more than just meaningful in my district. And that number right now, that 23,000 children, 82,000 people that have lost SNAP support, that number reflects only the impacts we've seen to this point and not the full consequences once these cuts are completely implemented. And look, farmers have been asking for a stronger farm safety net, and you know, we have done some work to strengthen commodity programs, expand crop insurance options, increase support for beginning ranchers and farmers, some of which you just referenced again there, and invested in additional resources into conservation programs. Those are all improvements that producers have long advocated for and farmers have long sought, and were certainly necessary and certainly things that I support. But we cannot move forward without recognizing the real people who are paying the price, and that's the children who didn't decide the circumstances they were born into and yet go hungry, the local grocers who relied on SNAP dollars, because as you know, look, SNAP dollars are not something that people can store in the bank. They can't invest SNAP dollars. They're spent, and they're only spent at grocery stores, and those grocery stores are primarily stocked with food that is purchased from materials that are produced on our farms in Alabama and across this country, even in your home state of Missouri. And state budgets will obviously, feel the ramifications of this at the end of the day once they're forced to make impossible choices related to the cost sharing. But today we're here to talk about, things that H.R. 1 did for FPAC, and farmers in my district are still calling for help even after these investments and after USDA's bridge payments. While we've made improvements to existing programs, the underlying struggles haven't gone away. Export markets are still feeling the impacts of tariffs, and I want to come back to that. And some of those markets may never return to what they once were, a reliable lifeline that helped keep family farms afloat. Input costs remain incredibly high. Fuel costs are up. Fertilizer costs are up. Markets remain volatile, and producers continue to face uncertainty every time they make decisions about planning, borrowing, or expanding their operations. So yes, we can all agree that something is better than nothing for farmers facing extraordinary challenges, but strengthening the farm safety net, expanding conservation opportunities, and improving crop insurance are meaningful steps, but farmers deserve credit for fighting to make those improvements a reality. We cannot keep shifting money around every few years and calling it a solution. We cannot continue to ask farmers to rely on bridge payments and emergency assistance while the same economic pressures continue year after year. Our job isn't simply to just help farmers survive, especially until just the next season. It is to create the kind of long-term stability that allows them to plan, invest, and run the type of operation that is worthy of passing down to the next generation. Undersecretary, let me ask you this: in your opinion, have the tariffs been good to farmers?
Well, I think that the president's approach to trade has, in my mind, has been a positive to the country. It has offered an opportunity to open up some new markets for agricultural products, and I would also say that from the U.S. Trade Rep and others, the Undersecretary for Trade at USDA, that in every trade agreement that's negotiated, agriculture has to be a part of it.
Well, understood, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I want to
No, sir,
be able to
understand.
get another question. What we hear about markets in Alabama, we have a lot of peanut farmers. I know you have a soybean background yourself. Soybean markets, as you know, we saw exports to China dry up almost 76% over the last year, and I understand some deals are in place to make some of that come back. But China is going to Brazil. They're standing up markets and making investments in Brazil for not just soybeans, but for peanuts and for other crops as well. So my concern is those markets aren't coming back to Alabama. that they're gone. They're drying up over these tariff policies. So yes, it may have opened up, some degree of a market in some respect, but we're losing ground permanently in the state of Alabama. And it's my hope that I can work with your office to take steps and push forward legislation that will actually, mitigate that harm as much as we possibly can.
Yes, sir, Congressman.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Mr. Messmer for 5 minutes.
Coming. We've had the pleasure of having Secretary Rollins in my district twice. Hopefully she's coming back. It is her second home. You're always welcome there. I feel obligated to address some of the comments that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made regarding SNAP. And I was raised in abject rural poverty by a single mother, and we had food stamps where it was an actual stamp that you put on a card at the grocery store. So these programs are incredibly important. I volunteered to be on the SNAP subcommittee twice, and if I get reelected, I'm going to do it again because I want to make sure that everyone understands how vital these programs are. So let's talk about SNAP rolls briefly, and then I'll actually get to the subject of this hearing. So there's over 186,000 people that were enrolled in SNAP that are dead. There's over 500,000 people that were on SNAP and getting benefits from more than one state or more than one jurisdiction. So if you cut SNAP benefits for 500,000 people in half because they're getting benefits in 2 different states, you, by definition, have a reduction in the amount of people on SNAP. That's just a fact. So what we are trying to do is make sure that every single tax dollar that is allocated to go to a hungry child goes to the hungry child, not a fraudster. And to say that, we're trying to starve children and treat families bad, that's just disingenuous. I mean, I understand their heart's in the right place, I really do. But we just got to stop that type of rhetoric. All right, now on to the subject of the hearing, sir. So there's some real disparities. I was an enlisted guy in the SEAL teams for a long time, so it's kind of like process, There's a disparity between the amount of time to apply to some programs where you get awarded things. Like EQIP is 3 to 6 months, CSP is 3 to 6 months, but like ECAP can be 3 days, right? So what are we doing, or what are you doing over there to make sure that we can kind of level these bubbles? Because if, 6 months to a farmer's, that's an entire growing season essentially. So, where I'm up north, down south they grow year round. So what are you guys doing over there to make sure that, Mr. Harris goes to try to get something from the USDA or FSA and it happens in a timely manner? Can you kind of explain that a bit?
Yes, sir, Congressman. I think ECAP was pretty prescriptive. Not a lot of discretionary decisions. I wasn't here for that yet, but it did. It was pretty straightforward. Rolled out, I would say, incredibly successfully. EQIP, and it depends on what the contract is. It depends on how NRCS is engaging with that producer. Yeah. We certainly have an opportunity to shorten that time. Okay. And I believe we have a new chief at NRCS, Colton Buckley. Colton is laser focused on looking at process times, anything that could be slowing down these contracts and the deployment of these contracts. In some cases, there may be design work that has to happen as part of the EQIP project. So not an excuse. It needs to be faster, and I think we're certainly looking at that.
Okay. Tell Colton to call Kelly Loeffler. So Kelly has been able to get $200 billion in fraud recouped from the federal government, and she's also pushed out $45 billion worth of actual loans to businesses. That's the highest amount of money that has gone from the SBA in its 72-year history. So they're doing both things, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm saying, where I come from, you go to somebody that's doing something right, and we call it, that's what right looks like. I'd strongly encourage you to speak to her team because she's just killing it over there, as is Brooke. We're very proud of her. So I don't have anything else for you other than the fact that I'm very happy that you're working for the American farmer, and I wish you the very best, sir. I yield.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. Now recognize gentleman from California, Mr. Carvajal, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This spring, Virginia was impacted by a devastating frost and freeze event that impacted orchards, vineyards, and crops across the Commonwealth. A month ago, on May 27th, Virginia submitted a request to USDA Secretary Rollins for secretarial designation of a disaster for frost and freeze damage in the Commonwealth. I raised this issue directly with the Secretary when she testified before this committee, and she promised to review Virginia's request as quickly as possible. We're still waiting for that approval request from the Secretary's office almost a month later. Mr. Fordyce, as the only Virginian on this committee, the Commonwealth's farmers can't wait much longer for this critical support. Now, there's a lot of rhetoric of support for farmers, farmers first, but I just want to make sure the actions are consistent with that rhetoric. Can you provide an update on the status of that approval?
Yes, Congressman, I can. FSA is finalizing that disaster designation. There are 15 counties in Virginia that are included in that disaster designation, and that Virginia will be receiving that disaster declaration this week.
Thank you. That's wonderful news. With the let's see. All right, so I'd like to turn to the question of the federal workforce at USDA. NRCS experienced a massive drop in its workforce, losing nearly 3,000 employees, or almost a quarter of its workforce. Farmers and local communities did not have anyone to call for conservation support, and local counties lost knowledgeable, helpful field staff, but the Office of the Secretary grew by 18%. FSA lost 21% of its staff. More than a third of the local FSA offices began the year with reduced headcount. On top of that, a survey by AFGE found that 76% of USDA staff working in and around the National Capital Region do not plan to relocate with USDA and plan to leave their jobs instead. In the face of all these cuts and staff losses, it's not like life in farm country has gotten any better. How is USDA going to retain an expert workforce with these types of numbers and ongoing staff cuts? How can farmers in Virginia, which the USDA is moving away from, expect good service from FSA and NRCS?
I've said a couple of times during the hearing that the real heroes in our mission area are the folks that are working in those county offices that are delivering programs where the rubber meets the road. And I value them so much. Throughout my career, I've worked directly with local NRCS and local FSA people, and so I want to say that up front. I think that that from an NRCS and FSA staffing perspective, we are on our way back up the other direction. NRCS, they're advertising positions not only to fill positions in local county offices, but also more specialized positions like engineers, like archaeologists, which are critical to deliver the mission. So NRCS is hiring. Their target hiring number is to get back up to around 9,500 for the total of the agency. FSA, on the other hand, they're hiring as well, but they're hiring to attrition, and they're hiring to attrition because the constraint is budgetary. So our hope is through the appropriations process in the next fiscal year that we will get additional appropriations for staffing for Farm Service Agency.
So I'd like to point out that a couple of times I've heard you talk about the DRP, the Deferred Resignation or Retirement Programs. These are government administered programs that the government has announced incentives in order to get people to leave. And so you talk about people leaving for their own, it fit their lifestyle, they want to leave. That was an opportunity provided by the government, and now we're in a position from digging out of that hole in order to build up staffing, make sure we can support our farmers. So it's not, it's voluntary to the extent that it was offered as an incentive, and it's not that it just happened. It was an act of nature. People decided to leave. So that is just not consistent with the needs of farmers and what farmers are facing. And I hope in the future as we go forward that we're a little bit more diligent, deliberate in how we plan for staff and make sure we retain that experience and that expertise that our farmers rely on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Baird is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
To testify. I want to start by giving credit and thanks to the hardest working people that I know. You know, in my district, the sun rose this morning at 5:20, and farmers in Illinois were up to see it. There's more work to be done after supper, and many in farm country are just finish up the day's work when the last light slips below the western horizon at 9:20 in the evening. Farmers want to succeed by using their talents and their know-how, not by cashing a check when the White House feels it's necessary. They want certainty in their jobs, and they want resiliency when disaster strikes. It doesn't take a meteorologist to tell you that Illinois now leads the nation in tornado touchdowns here this year. And many of those have occurred in farm fields and farm country and small hometowns in Illinois, across Mr. Bost, Ms. Miller, Ms. Budzinski's, and my district. Mr. Undersecretary, you oversee vital programs like crop insurance, and I appreciate your attention to making this work for them. You also oversee conservation funding at NRCS, which is essential to keeping our farmland resilient for the next growing season and the next generation. You know, I agree with our ranking member that we should be heralding a bipartisan 5-year farm bill that would yield certainty even in the face of a failure by an administration. Instead, the GOP's H.R. 1 is being paid for by funds taken from hungry people and cutting vital programs in Middle America. Now, I believe in fiscal responsibility, but taking funding from vulnerable families is not how we should be budgeting the most important agricultural programs. But let's get on to my questions. H.R. 1 included an expanded subsidy for administrative and operating costs for states with high loss ratios, which disproportionately benefits southern crop growers. And I want to follow up from my friend from South Dakota's question. Is the agency considering further relief for Midwestern states with very low loss ratios? As you know, productive farmers like those in my district tend to overpay to offset losses in other regions.
That is a great question, and it is actually very timely. The Risk Management Agency, from time to time, does rating studies. We just have received a rating study to look at that very thing. When I travel, I hear exactly what you have said. We haven't had time to necessarily, I think, 100% digest what that rating study looks like. But that is one of the things that RMA does do and conducts those rating studies.
Could you share that with our office?
Is that at some point? Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You know, I want to move on to conservation. 2,400 people lost their jobs at NRCS in 2025, one of the hardest hit agencies at the USDA. We lost 20% of our NRCS workforce in the land of Lincoln, putting even more strain on farmers who need assistance improving their soil health. Is there a plan to meet the needs here? Because nowadays, you know, it seems like all my constituents here, when they want to call and get a solution to a problem, is your call is very important to us, stay on the line. Shouldn't we be making sure that we have the workforce to meet the demand here?
I do think that is critical, and I've indicated a couple of times that NRCS is advertising, is hiring positions, not only at the local level, but also in those critical areas of engineers and archaeologists and other positions that help that agency move those practices forward.
So help me understand. So last year we had 78 NRCS folks working for farmers directly in Illinois. In your budget for next year, fiscal year 2027, there's 5 in the entire state of Illinois. Agriculture is the #1 driver of our economy in Illinois. So how can the USDA expect that to work?
So Congressman, can you repeat that, the numbers?
That we're cutting down from the numbers of hundreds down to single digits.
So NRCS, and I don't know specifically on Illinois' hiring plan, but we are, as an agency, planning to hire up to 9,500, which if we spread that out across the country, I would think that Illinois would have a positive number. So I don't know.
Let's manifest that.
I would like to visit more with you or your staff about what that number looks like.
Thank you. When we talk about modernizing our agency, I hope that there is that focus on what we are doing for those farm families that are hurting today. Mr. Undersecretary, thanks for being here today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Mr. Finstead for 5 minutes.
California, where specialty crops make up the majority of agriculture, grown in the area. Many farmers across the country, including in my district, are currently dealing with a multitude of challenges. Labor costs continue to rise. Growers are navigating uncertainty in export markets due to this administration's trade wars, as well as increasing droughts, floods, heat waves, and wildfires are creating production risks. At the same time, many specialty crop producers do not have access to the same farm safety net programs available to producers of major commodity crops, and instead must rely on more heavily on conservation programs, crop insurance, and disaster assistance to manage risk and remain competitive. And while H.R. 1 included some notable investments in farm conservation and disaster assistance programs under your mission area, this came at a cost of cutting SNAP funding that millions of Americans depend on. Unlike some of my colleagues who supported H.R. 1, I do not believe these priorities are mutually exclusive. We should not have to choose between supporting our farmers and supporting families struggling with food insecurity. We can and should make robust investments in both. Even with H.R. 1 only making investments to programs for growers, farm groups have made it clear this funding won't be enough and they will need additional farm aid given the unprecedented economic challenges they are currently facing. Nevertheless, the USDA moves forward with implementing H.R. 1. It is critical that these investments are delivered in a way that benefits all sectors of agriculture, including specialty crop producers. Can you provide examples of how USDA is ensuring that H.R. 1's investments in farm safety net, disaster, and conservation programs are reaching specialty crop growers in a meaningful way, particularly in California?
Yes, Congressman, thank you for that. You know, from an NRCS standpoint, 168 different conservation practice standards available. Those 168 conservation practice standards are available in California. That's a little bit of a change that we've made. Some states, in some cases, we're not offering all of those options. That has been a change that we have made and made those available in every state. From a safety net standpoint, certainly, the provisions within the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, we are well on our way to getting those administered, and certainly California farmers can take advantage of those. On the risk management side, we've had a few conversations about specialty crop farmers and the risk management tools available to them. The Administrator Swanson at the Risk Management Agency has conducted a series of specialty crop roundtables, and in those roundtables were farmers, also crop insurance agents that serve those areas and serve those farmers to better understand where the gaps are and where we're not meeting the needs of those specialty crop farmers. It's going to take a little bit. The development of a new product through Risk Management Agency, there is a process and it takes a bit. But certainly we are looking at all the opportunities to be able to serve all farmers and support them in the way that they need to be supported.
Thank you. Undersecretary, USDA indicated that the reorganization of the farm production and conservation mission area will support the continued growth and effectiveness of the federal crop insurance program. Many specialty crop producers suffer from gaps, as you mentioned, in available insurance products and coverage levels. How will these organizational changes impact crop insurance accessibility and effectiveness for specialty crops grown in California and in my district?
So the reorganization, as it relates to RMA, really is the organization will look pretty much the same. There's very minor structural changes, but certainly, again, I would go back to the agency's very strong desire to be responsive to specialty crop farmers across the country. Certainly in California, it's critical, obviously. But continue to look for options and look for ways to be supportive of specialty crop farmers.
Thank you. I'm running out of time, but I think there's some funding limitations with EQIP and the CSP program that need certainly your attention. But with that, I have limited time. I'll submit this question for the record. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Mr. Harris recognized for 5 minutes.
Let's break down a long, tense House Agriculture hearing. 7 members took turns questioning a top USDA official, Richard Fordyce, about how the administration is running farm programs after the big Republican law. The fights were about food aid, farm staffing, tariffs, and disaster help. We are going to hold the answers up against the record. The backdrop matters. This hearing was about putting the 2025 law, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, into practice at the Agriculture Department. So the members were not arguing theory. They were asking what the law is already doing to farmers and to families on food assistance. Here's the pattern to watch. The USDA official's message was steady. Things are under control, hiring continues, programs are working. The members kept producing numbers that told a harder story. One side offered reassurance, the other side brought receipts. Start with the loudest exchange from Congressman Jim McGovern. He went after the new law itself, the one he calls the Big Ugly Bill, and the cuts it makes to food assistance. So what does it do? The law is projected to cut food assistance, the program known as SNAP, by about $186 billion over 10 years. Some analyses put the figure even higher. Whatever the exact number, it is the largest cut to food aid in the program's history. And it is not a future projection only. Between the summer of 2025 and early 2026, about 3.5 million people lost access to food benefits as the new rules took effect. For context, roughly 42 million Americans were receiving that help. The cuts work mostly through new work requirements. They now reach older adults up to 64, parents of teenagers, and groups previously exempt, like veterans and people who are homeless. Miss the requirement, and you can get help for only 3 months out of 3 years. Next, Congressman Jim Costa went local and specific. He pressed the official on a payment backlog hitting farmers in California and what is causing the delays. Costa's question was blunt. Farmers are waiting, and he wanted to know why the checks are not going out. Look at who is left to process those payments. The Farm Service Agency had about 8,100 staff in 2025. That fell to about 7,300, and the new budget calls for about 6,000. That is a cut of more than 25% in 2 years. So connect the two. Costa points to a backlog. The agency that clears the backlog has lost a quarter of its people. You do not need a chart to see the link, but the chart is right there. Fewer workers, slower payments. Then came the line that mattered most, because it is the central fact check of the day. The USDA official told the committee there was no hiring freeze, and that the agencies are still hiring. Set that reassurance next to the staffing numbers, and judge for yourself. The third member, Congressman Shomari Figures, widened the lens to trade. He challenged the official on tariffs and what they are doing to the farmers who actually grow and sell the crops. Figures put the squeeze in plain terms. The economics back him up. Farmers are facing elevated input costs and tight margins, and trade disputes have cost them export markets, while the same households can be hit by the food aid cuts. It is a two-front squeeze, on the people who grow the food and the people who need it. Not every member was on offense. Congressman Derek Van Orden pushed the other way, defending the law and focusing on fraud and program integrity in food assistance. His case was that tighter rules stop waste and fraud. That is a real goal. But here is the scale it leaves out. The new requirements put more than 5 million people, roughly 1 in 8 recipients, at risk of losing some or all of their food help, including children and seniors. And there is a structural change most viewers have not heard about. Starting in 2028, states may have to pay a share of the actual food benefits for the first time in the program's history. That is not a fraud fix. It is a cost shift from the federal government to your state. The fifth member, Congressman Eugene Vindman, turned to emergencies. He pressed USDA on disaster aid and on whether the staff cuts leave the department able to respond when a storm or a drought hits. Here is the scale of the workforce change. Across the Agriculture Department, roughly 20,000 employees left between early 2025 and early 2026. These are the people who administer farm loans, disaster assistance, and commodity programs, the work that keeps farms solvent after a bad year. So Vyman's worry is not abstract. Disaster aid depends on people to process it. Cut the people, and the help arrives slower, exactly when farmers can least afford to wait. The official offered reassurance. The headcount offered a warning. Congressman Eric Sorensen made it concrete with a single state. He challenged the official on conservation staffing in Illinois and used a number that stuck. His example was hard to wave away. Zoom out, and the trend holds nationally. The Natural Resources Conservation Service, which helps farmers with soil, water, and conservation plans, fell from about 11,500 staff to about 9,200. That is roughly 2,300 positions gone. And the budget points the same direction. Conservation technical assistance, the money that pays for that help, would fall from $850 million to about $111 million. That is not a trim. It is the program being hollowed out. The last member, Congressman Salud Carbajal, brought it home to the crops on your table. He pressed the official on specialty crops, trade wars, and the squeeze on growers who do not get big commodity subsidies. Carbajal's point was that the people who grow your produce are caught in the crossfire. And it fits the pattern of the whole hearing. Higher costs from tariffs, fewer USDA staff to help, and a law that pulls money towards some priorities and away from others. The official described a department managing fine. The members described a squeeze with a paper trail. So let's total it up the way a fact check should. On food aid, the largest cut in program history is already pushing millions off. On staffing, the agencies that serve farmers are down sharply. On conservation, the help is being defunded. The official said hiring continues. The numbers say the workforce shrank. None of this tells you how to vote. You can believe food aid needed reform, or that the federal workforce was too big. The narrow point is accuracy. When an official says there is no freeze and hiring continues, the staffing table should agree. Here, they do not. So where does it leave us? With a department that says it is coping, and a committee that brought the receipts showing the strain. When the testimony and the staffing charts disagree, the charts are the harder thing to argue with. Watch three things from here. Whether the food aid losses keep climbing past $3.5 million. Whether USDA actually rebuilds the staff it says it is hiring. And whether the farm payments farmers are owed finally go out. Those answers will come on the record. That is our breakdown. Stay with us.